Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and we are back with our How to Map series. And for this map, we're going to be looking at Big Race. And we've actually dropped down some tiers. The previous two maps between Greece and Sleeping Giant have been tier 8 to tier 10. Big Race is a map where you see tier 2 through tier 5 ships. It's a 30 by 30 kilometer map, and the WoW's wiki on this map, I'll go ahead and read. Big Race features numerous large islands and a fairly symmetrical layout. The islands feature large enough mountains which can provide cover from short and long-range fire. It is unavailable for higher tier matches. The action on this map typically occurs around the northeast and southwest corners, with intermittent destroyer battles in the center. It is a fairly balanced map for both sides due to its highly symmetrical nature. Do note, however, that as the opposing teams spawn so close together, some ships will be able to shoot each other within a short period of time. This map can be played in either Epicenter or 2-base standard battle mode. Now that's not entirely true, because you can also play this in Domination, and I think there's another version you can play as well. So if you're new here and you're wondering what is this How to Map series about, basically, we go through, we're looking at the different maps in World of Warships and discussing them, where I'm sharing my experience with the maps, my opinions on how to use the map to your advantage as a player. And we do each map in 6 parts. So in Big Race today, this is part 1. We're just going to be here, we're here in training room, and we're just going to look over the map. We're going to look at the different islands and talk about the symmetrical nature that the WoW's wiki talks about for this map. So I'm just going to go ahead and go into the map mode. So this is what we have. Let's just talk about the map overall, and then we're going to go with free cam, and we're going to kind of jump from island to island. Yes, so let's begin. So as we look here, basically your teams will be either spawning this side or this side. You have, to a certain extent, when they say this map is highly symmetrical, it is maybe more or less from a north-south, but to a certain extent, east to west is a bit different. Every time I play this map, what is most stands out to myself and even clanmates is this southwestern part here. I believe in the WoW's wiki it said the southwest and the northwest. Let's see, it says typically occurs around the northeast and southwest corners. So they're saying most battles happen up around here, most happen up around here. These two flanking measures. They say that because of this open area here, it's pretty vulnerable. But what stands out to most my clanmates and myself is this area down here. It tends to be quite tricky, especially when you're, as you can see, we're here on this domination mode with 3 caps across. And what's tricky about this area is that we call it like the destroyer kill zone, or Death Valley. Typically you'll find a lot of destroyers flooding this area, maybe even cruisers towards the beginning of the match. And rushing in here can spell demise for you, because if you, for example, sail in this direction, just a couple of destroyers and cruiser, I mean, you turn around, like you kind of have to run horizontal, because you can't, you get pinned against the landmass here. And the same can be said for the opposite as well. So it tends to be a lot of torpedoes slung through these areas a lot. So typically what I tend to do is I don't enter that area right at the beginning. I might hover out around here a bit more. But most of the time I see this map played is in standard battle, where you have a cap here and you have a cap here. As you have these stretch of islands, you can definitely do a lot of island hopping here, whether you're a destroyer, cruiser, battleship. And then this northeast part that the WoW's wiki talks about is that a lot of players kind of do this Y when you're starting off here. They go kind of like that. And playing up along here can be really good, especially for destroyers. You're not as boxed in up here. You can pull out, you can fall straight back, where, you know, here it's kind of a death trap for really any ship. So going in here in the beginning phases of the battle can be really deadly. Usually you want to wait to go into this area until more of the enemy team has been thinned out of this sector before you push in there with your own ship. When we're talking more with this area, like I said, it's more open. You can more easily engage, disengage, so on and so forth. When it comes to aircraft carriers on this map, it seems to be, I've noticed highly with this map in particular, that aircraft carrier players would tend to go down here. They try to get around this landmass, and it's easier for them to fly their planes in quicker. They have to a certain extent, a little bit more cover over here than, let's say, an aircraft carrier goes down here. I mean, I've seen plenty of Hoshos, Langleys, all, you know, bottled up all the way down here. I've seen them back here in the corner. I've seen them maybe more in the spawn area. Because, as the WoW's Wiki was saying, it doesn't take a lot of time before you start spotting enemy ships, because one is just the size of the map, and then at the tiers 2 through tier 5, a lot of ships can be detected from a pretty good distance, but also just due to the nature that it is one of the smaller maps. They have maps that are 24 by 24 kilometers, but this one's a 30 by 30 kilometer. Okay, with that being said, let's just dive in and let's look at the different map features. So let's just talk about where these aircraft carrier players tend to go sometimes. So you notice that I was saying you'll find some that will go down this direction. Part of that is because it provides pretty good cover, where you'll see aircraft carrier, maybe he's more parked around this area. But they can just kind of sit here and be able to throw a lot of planes in without really getting detected, because most time they won't get detected until maybe an enemy ship has moved up through here or out of this channel. But the danger is if you're not paying attention to your mini map as an aircraft carrier player, that there are enemy ships pushing in and you don't run towards your left here in time, is that you can just get cornered and die pretty quickly. And then let's go over to, we'll make our way to the other part down over here. So let's look at the death trap, shall we? So you can kind of see that it basically just kind of funnels into this harbor, this cove over here. And you really have these 3 islands to play off of. Now, what's really deadly about this area is if you are a destroyer with hydroacoustic search or cruiser with hydroacoustic search, because a lot of players, when they first move in, maybe they'll smoke up and then someone hydros you. You're kind of screwed because you're running and the enemy knows you're there, and they're trying to get these shots on you. So typically, if you play further along the backside, you're actually kind of doing yourself a little bit of a disfavor, I would say, to a certain extent, because if you get caught out, you're just so far behind and you don't have any cover to dive behind. Versus if you play a little bit closer to the islands, you can use it to your advantage if you're aware and pay attention to what enemy team's doing. So if you know there's you're here, let's say, you know there's an enemy destroyer pushing up, then you can kind of get in this ambush position, or maybe, even be prepared to kite if the enemy team's pushing in, using your smoke screen, getting torpedoes off, that kind of thing. When you're at this tier through tiers 2 through tier 5, most destroyers don't have long-range torpedoes. You can be dealing with anywhere, I think, at these tiers from 4 kilometers to 6, you go to 8. Maybe there's some 10-kilometer torpedoes in there as well, with some of the more newer ships that World Warships been introducing. But again, this is a pretty tight area. We're really just talking about the span area of a cap, right? It's not super crazy here in distance. So really, 6-kilometer torpedoes can be really deadly when you're dealing with ships. So basically, if you want to enter this trap area, you have to come with a plan. What am I going to do if the enemy team shows up in force? What if there's not a lot of enemy team players? What if there's a destroyer pushes in on me? And knowing the ships, enemy ships as well, like does this destroyer cruiser have hydro? Does it have torpedoes? And it'll help you be able to counter what the enemy does in this area. So you really have to come with a plan. But my advice is just wait before you push in. Just maybe you wait along, this area, because if you need to disengage, you can go that way. You can go around this way. The same is for over here. If you need to disengage, you kind of play around this area-ish. You can disengage that way. You can go that way. And giving yourself ample time to see what the enemy team's doing. You're gathering intelligence data. Once you know what the enemy team and how they're positioning, how many enemy ships are coming in, then you can make your play based off of that. Now, when we go down and look at these islands a little bit better, to a certain extent, you can't really shoot over them. But what you can do is you get these edges that have tapered off and that you can easily get shells over. You'll notice that for both islands. So you might be able to sneak a couple shells in. Now, if you are right up on the island, you can see like this one jets up kind of high. And versus if you're, maybe let's say you're back, let me get this tree out of the way. This area, then it becomes a little bit easier to spam shells and over. And you'll see kind of the same, but this is a little bit lower, so you can edge up a little bit. And then you've got the smaller of the three islands over here. It's pretty flat. It's typically pretty easy to dump torpedoes or dump shells over it. Yeah. Now, the one thing you do have to be mindful of is that players are just typically going to be spamming torpedoes in this area. So that's why if you play around the islands, it really helps. If you're just, let's say you're detected, you're in a cruiser, you're just charging this direction, the enemy destroyer over there, and you're not going to stop behind the island. They're just going to dump torpedoes. And if you just keep charging and you don't stop and wait maybe, 5-10 seconds, figure out what's going on before you go on the island, that's a smart idea. Just to help avoid any torpedoes. So you get to use these islands to your advantage once you do commit to this area. But again, I wouldn't recommend diving right in at the start of the match. Let some time go by where you, several minutes where you know how many enemy ships are coming in this area, how many you're going to engage with, and then you can make your ploy off that. Because once enemy ships are in there, let's say they move there in force and you're over here, then you can feel free to engage and disengage, right? Because you have this open area. They're kind of more constricted, you dump torpedoes this way or you dump torpedoes this way. It's same for on the opposite side. So when the enemy team has to push into you as a defensive position, they're at a disadvantage. And so that's why, being able to utilize these torp alleys works really well. I also talked about how there's also carriers that also will find themselves more along this area. I've seen some here. I've seen even some come up here. So you can, come to this area like I don't see them, and not until you get further out enough can you see a carrier player that's more in that space. So let's talk about this side. Let's talk about these three islands, and we'll work our way from south to north. When we look at these islands, let's go down here. You can see a lot of these mountains have this taper off action. Most all these islands do, if I'm pretty correct. Where you'll have this high mass in the center, but you get these low edges on most all the sides. It's kind of straightforward in that manner for these islands. You're not going to be able to shoot over the center really, unless you're a battleship further back. But you have these low tapered off ends, so you can utilize that as a destroyer, as a cruiser, as a battleship, and positioning yourself to be able to fire on the enemy team. Even if you're pushing in, like, for like the center island, sometime, when the standard battle, and you have your capped, which is in like this area. Even as a destroyer, these islands are really helpful because, like I said, there's a lot of island hopping you can do, and utilizing the island to run up. If there's a camping cruiser right here and you're in a destroyer and just sneak right up, like you have that potential at all the islands. I feel like the low tier destroyers kind of teach you to use islands to help set up an ambush. At least it was for me in my mind when I play these lower tiers, especially when I first started as a player. You can kind of see that this island's more set up to north to south fashion. Again, you're seeing these tapered edges all around, so you can again really utilize that to your advantage. I mean, you notice how they jet out in different spots. Like you kind of have this hooks out here. You know, it helps if you're kind of moving up along the islands, getting into position as a shore cruiser battleship. If you're a battleship and you're advancing, you don't always want to be hugging the island to a certain extent, because you could just be moving up to the island and enemy destroyer rushes you out. Not saying that's typical for the lower tiers, but it's a possibility. So you kind of want to mind the gap, if you will. So that's really, I don't think there's much more to say about those three particular islands. You look at these two as well. So let's just talk about, or three here in this cap. So let's talk about this area, because this is another common area where we have a lot of fighting going on. What I like about this place, fighting on this map, or this part of the map, is for if you're kind of advancing from this direction, you have this nice hook in here where you can comfortably move up in. See, if you're playing like a domination mode, you know, you can just get right in here and cap. Enemy team can't spot you. You have this large island in, you can just dive in behind. And this same, like, you know, kind of over here, you don't have this hook like this island does, but you still get to stop shy, and where you can utilize this backside of the island here before committing pulling out. Again, it's just kind of like an area you just want to kind of see what the enemy team's doing in the first few minutes of the battle before you push in. Of course, if you're a destroyer, you want to gather intelligence data for your cruisers, for your battleships. Especially, you know, if you're a carrier player, you definitely want to be spotting for your team, kind of helping them find out what's coming on each flank. But also, too, when you run into destroyers, you know, that's kind of your main objective as a destroyer, is knock out the other destroyers. And then if you're able to dump torps on cruisers, battleships, great. But your main objective as a destroyer really should be to knock out the enemy destroyers. Certain destroyers are more built for that, of course, than others, but you can still use that to your advantage. So yeah, so you have this happening here. Kind of one of the things that sometimes I'll notice is that, you know, players like islands, you know, so a battleship player might not be willing to kind of, if you go all the way out here, let's see here. Let's see if I can just kind of zoom back out. I don't really want to spam into the map key. Because one of the things as a battleship player, when you're on Big Race, is that your ship's maneuverability is quite slow. So if a lot of battleships kind of commit to this flank, and you're moving so slow, you're all the way out over here. And then let's say the enemy team knocked out your flank over here. It takes you a really long time to position, so you just really have to be mindful of that. Of course, you're always going to be looking for crossfires, being able to set those up as well. Let's talk about these three center islands, and we'll talk about these two in the rear. So these three islands here that I'm kind of drawing in on are nice. Again, you're seeing, like I've said, a lot of these islands, they just kind of taper off around the edges of the island. I'm on this key. Still getting used to the proper keys. Again, you're seeing these all taper off around the edges. This island's kind of moving more north-south. This is a bit more east-west. This is kind of just roundish to a certain extent. But again, as a destroyer, as a cruiser player, you really get to utilize these islands in island hopping, moving up, catching the enemy off guard. It really helps out a lot, because a player who's not paying attention to their mini-map can just totally be taken off guard. You know, maybe there's a cruiser sitting here, you know, a destroyer, and you just kind of like pull out here, dump torps, you know, go back. You can catch ships off guard. So you have to be knowing what's going on in your immediate area. If you're a battleship and you're just kind of parked here and you're just spamming shots in this direction, but you're not really paying attention to what happened here, enemy team can easily move up and take you out. Let's talk about these two islands individually. So we'll go a little bit lower. In standard battle, this part of the island, the cap kind of like circles, I think something like through here, somewhere through here. And so it's easy for an enemy destroyer to move up undetected and just sit here and cap. So you have to be mindful that if you just leave the mid wide open, that can happen. But in standard battle, it takes 3 minutes to cap if there's only one enemy ship entering your cap. So a lot of destroyers I've noticed, because it's really easy for them to sneak up through these islands, they kind of move and just sit in here and cap, and then even pop smoke if need be. Again, you're kind of seeing this tapering off around the islands. Even like here, you can get some pretty good shots off over an advancing team that, let's say, is moving in towards the center. If you're in a cruiser, battleship, kind of sitting in this position. So again, just be aware that this island can help you, but it also can be a curse with enemy ships moving in. And again, you kind of see like here, you kind of got this cutout here. If your battleship sitting here, sometimes you can just completely take a cruiser off guard over here, because if this is tapered, so you have a lot of room to work with in this area. We look at this other island. Again, you see the tapered action of how it comes more down around the edges. This backside here, you've got this rock that jets out, so there's not a lot of space to work off with. If you're sitting in this direction here, enemy ships moving up, you get to use this to your advantage. So you just have to be mindful of, where does these parts of the islands taper off? How can I use it as an offensive position in positioning myself? But also, how can you as a player take advantage of a ship that maybe they think they're safe behind there, and you're just able to blow them out of the water. So really the map and how Wargaming created this map, it's pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of crazy stuff going on because, one, you don't find radar at tier 5, right? But usually what you have is you can be finding yourself in double CV matches, 2 on your team, 2 on enemy team. So that can be a pain to deal with, but it's pretty straightforward in how Wargaming has, World of Warships has set up these islands. They have, all these tapered off happening here. It's not really complicated. It's not like they have these cutouts in the center of the islands in different places, so on and so forth. But it gives you a good idea of an overview of this map. So I really think that's all I want to say. In part 2, we'll be talking about carriers for this map with positioning, so on and so forth, what you should be looking out for, so on and so forth. But just note that, a lot of the action does happen around the southwest corner and this northeast corner, but you just want to be mindful of the mid. A player who commits himself to running down the mid can easily find himself in a crossfire if he does it too early and not paying attention to enemy team positioning. So, yeah, I think we're gonna call it. So if you liked today's video, if you're looking forward to more of the conversations we're gonna be having with Big Race and how to map, make sure to click that subscribe button to follow along. If you are enjoying so far with this series, please consider leaving a like. If you don't like, of course, you can feel free to hit that dislike button. And if you have already subscribed, I really appreciate your support here on the channel. And just doing this as a hobby because I quite enjoy it. So until next time, take care.